All right, I'm just going to talk about Don Nelson probably pretty briefly. Well, I mean briefly in like the grand sense, but um, so John Nelson just passed away, and he's probably the most underrated, one of the most underrated coaches of all time, just because he never won a championship. I don't think he also never made the finals, but he was one of the best coaches ever. And I mean, like he has the most wins, or he got the most wins at one point. I think Popovich ended up passing him. So like you can't do that without being a good coach, because it means your teams are good, and it also means that like you keep getting jobs, so people like the job that you're doing. But as a player, he was also quite good. He played for the Boston Celtics predominantly. He actually played for Chicago Zephyrs. He got a start. I believe the franchise is becoming the Baltimore Bullets, Capital Bulls, or whatever. And then he played for the Lakers for 2 seasons, and then but from his age 25 to 35 season, he played with Boston. And he was an incredibly durable player. He played 82 games in his career, like from 1967, 68 to 71, 72. He played 82 every season, one, two, three, four, five, six times over 70, pretty much every season outside of his second season in Los Angeles, his third season, and his rookie season. He played 62 games. But he wasn't just like a dude who like showed up to work every day. His advanced metrics honestly were like quite good. I mean, he's got a career win shares per 48 of 0.165. Like he was a good player, and mainly it was because he was a very efficient scorer. He was a small forward slash power forward, and throughout his career, his true shooting was 9% better than league average. And he got to the line a fair amount. Was a pretty good free throw shooter. So it's just like, I believe he was a reserve predominantly for the Celtics. He won 5 championships with them as a player, but he was good. Like he was a very good bench player on some very good teams, and he he's someone that honestly probably would have been more valued in today's game, where people are more cognizant of how important shooting efficiency is. But you know, great player, and he got into coaching very quickly. So he retired from playing at 35 in 1975-76. Right away, he latches on as an assistant with Milwaukee, his age 36 season. And then by 76-77, he gets the job partway through the season. They go 27-37. And then he slowly built the Bucks into one of the best teams in the NBA, who just so happened to have the unfortunate distinction of being like a really, really, really good team in a conference with two all timers. For the early part, two all timers, and then one all time team to contend with. So from 1980, 81 to 1986, 87, they won over 50 games every season. He won 60, 59, 57, 55, 51, 50. He won the Central Division, or whatever the fuck it was called back then, I believe 7 straight seasons. But he topped out in the Eastern Conference Finals. Those teams did, because they had to contend with those incredible Sixers teams that are initially headlined by Dr. J, and then Dr. J and Moses Malone. Those teams are awesome. They made multiple finals. They won one. And then also the Boston Celtics, the team where he played for, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, all that stuff. So like he just had like, and this sometimes happens. There's great players and great coaches and great teams that just never break through and win a title, because there's just an all-time team in the way. And people generally kind of look at those teams and say like, what's wrong with them? Like, oh, they just didn't have it. And usually it's just like, look, it's really hard to build a team that can win a title. And the reality is like plenty of organizations have done it. It's just they happened to go up against a team that was beyond that. And like that's why those are the teams that people remember. Like you remember the Celtics in the 80s for that reason. You remember like the Bulls in the 90s for that reason. And so that was the luck of the draw. And those were his best teams for a long time. And obviously he ended up leaving Milwaukee. And I think today, for most younger people, he's most remembered as being the coach of the Golden State Warriors. And originally, he had two stints with them. His first stint from 88-89 to 94-95, the Run TMC, that's kind of where he got his whole like Nelly ball and up tempo, offense leaning kind of basketball. I guess like not ethos, but like reputation with those teams. Those teams were like good, but they weren't ever great. I think they might have topped out in like the second round. Like they had good players, but they didn't have like one of those top tier guys. And you know, once again, he did a good job, and you're constricted as a coach by the talent on your team. And so he then would coach them for his final stint of coaching. And those teams are most famous for basically just beating the Dallas Mavericks in the first round. They're pretty good teams. They were fun teams. And yeah. And so he kind of is remembered for being one of the first coaches that was willing to play small and fast. And if I'm not mistaken, his rationale was back when he played for the Celtics. They would have practices where they'd like scrimmage and it'd be all the guards versus all the bigs. And his takeaway from those scrimmages were like, we kind of smoked those fuckers. So he's like, I don't know why it couldn't work in the NBA. And I think same thing that happened with Mike D'Antoni is that there's this idea where people are like, oh, these guys play small, like that's what they do. That's not actually what any coach is trying to do. Every basketball coach understands that size is paramount. I mean, it's the only professional sport that has like a pretty serious height requirement in a way that basically no other professional sport does. And I don't think the teams that play quote unquote small, it's not actually like that's not their goal. Their goal is to get the best five players on the court and maybe the best five players in terms of like how they fit together. And I think that's really what you have to view Don Nelson, Nelly's ability as a coach was he's clearly very, very good at identifying unique ways to get the most out of his teams and his players. And that's what great coaching is all about. Especially in the NBA, especially in American sports where you don't really have the same ability to build a team to play a way that you want. Like in soccer, right? Like Pep Guardiola is probably the best manager of all time, but he also like you're gonna build a team specifically for him, and he's able to do that. Would he have been successful in America? I'm sure, but he probably wouldn't have been as successful because he needs his guys. And Don Nelson ability to do that was, I mean, it's the reason why he won when he retired, he had the most wins of all time, because you're not going to have rosters that are going to be able to do what you ideally want to do season in and season out. It's just, that's not the nature of a salary cap sport. It's not the nature of a sport where there's a draft. Like you just have to kind of make do with what you have. And so when he had the Warriors in that first go around, they had good guards, good shooting, guys that were good in an up-tempo system. Okay, like that's what we're going to do. Second time around, same thing. And in between those, he actually coached the Knicks for a fraction of a season. He got through 59 games, 95, 96. Look, they went 34 and 25. He was coming in after Pat Riley, right? Like, the Knicks, this is kind of the beginning of the Knicks entering they're in a mess phase because they lose out on Pat Riley. After that, he ends up in Dallas, and he takes over a really bad team. His first year, they win 16 games. In 90, he takes over. He wins 16 games out of 66 in 97, 98. Then there's the lockout season. They go 19 and 31. Then 2000, 99, 2000, 40 and 42. 2000, 2001, 53 wins, 57, 60. And Obviously that's over Dirk Nowitzki's growth from being a international prospect to eventually becoming one of the best players in NBA history. Look, Don Nelson coaching was just like, I think the best way to describe it is he had a long career because he was great, but he also got to coach a bunch of different teams. Like those Bucks teams had great perimeter defense and great guards, like Sidney Moncrief, who's probably one of the more underrated players in NBA history because I think he had like knee injuries and that kind of derailed his ability to have the longevity associated with all time greats. But like he was awesome, and that was probably the best player on those Bucks teams. Then Chris Mullin, who's not great defensively, an incredible shooter. Then with Dallas, you have this completely unique 7-foot shooter who's a power forward and also kind of plays center. And so he just had the ability to create teams or build a concept around his teams to get the most out of them, which is dope. That's mainly all I want to get to on his coaching career. I mean, he won Coach of the Year 3 times, and I wrote about this. Actually, if you want to check it out on the Above the Break Substack, you can. Coach of the Year is a fucking stupid award in a lot of senses because it doesn't actually really reward winning. Obviously, it rewards winning in some sense, but it doesn't reward like it's much rarer for the coach of the best team in the league to win Coach of the Year than it should be. Now, obviously, basketball, overwhelming talent. Like I kind of understand the rationale, but if you go look in like Europe, like the manager of the year is a lot of times coming from the champion. That team also spends more. They have the best players, but like that's who they're voting on. It's like that's the manager of the year, and I just find it interesting that Coach of the Year is kind of this award where it's like it's basically what coach's team beat their Vegas odds the best. Nelson has 3 because he's a great coach, and also like he took over teams and like built them up and got them better. He like I don't think any team he took over was like really all that fully formed. You could say the Warriors that first stint, and maybe even kind of the second stint, they were like relatively fully formed. But all of his other jobs, he took over teams that like were struggling a bit and helped build them up. And yeah, so 3-time Coach of the Year. And in 1996-97, he was voted one of the top 10 coaches in NBA history. And he still had over a decade left of coaching. So after he finished coaching, he ended up retiring to Hawaii, where he smoked a lot of weed, kind of looked like a hippie. Apparently, he was into poker, so he seemed like he had lived a pretty dope life, if we're going to be completely honest. And yeah, so Don Nelson, like, I know everyone's like associates him with the Warriors. Probably should be more associated with the Milwaukee Bucks. If I'm going to be completely honest, like those teams were legitimately great. I would, if like you're interested in basketball history, go check the, like, you can go look at those seasons on Basketball Reference. You can go read about them. They were really, really, really good teams. And they just were like, I don't know. There's probably like some analogy, but it's like, they were always the, was it the bridesmaid or the bride? That was just kind of the situation. They just didn't have an all-time tier 1 great player like Philadelphia and Boston did during that stretch. But those teams were really formidable and really good. And they're probably one of the most underlooked teams in NBA history, because the 80s, people talk about basically, it's predominantly the conversation going to be about the Lakers and the Celtics. But you'll have teams that pop in there, like, the Celtics battle with the Sixers and the Lakers playing the Sixers. So the Sixers get some shine. The Rockets, they made the finals, I believe, technically twice in the 80s. I think, yeah, it was both. I forget if they made the finals in 79, 80, or if it was 80, 81. I think it was 79, 80. That team had Moses Malone. But so the Rockets kind of fall in there. And then after that, it kind of becomes, the Lakers battles with the Pistons and Michael Jordan's battle with the Pistons. And than the 90s, and it's all about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. And people kind of just, and people just don't really bring up those Bucks teams because they never made the finals, and they never won a title because of that. And so they're kind of viewed as not being they're the team that couldn't break through. And just the reality is that like the Western, if they played in the Western Conference, I almost guarantee they would have made one NBA Finals during that run, because like while those Lakers teams were good, but like the West was just not nearly as good as the East, especially at the top. Like there's a reason why they made so many more finals than the Celtics, because the Celtics had to get through the Celtics and the Sixers when they're vying for championships, making the finals over the from like 80 to like 85, 86 range. One of those teams had to beat both of Philadelphia / Boston and the Bucks. All right. Hopefully you found this informative. And Don Nelson is a great coach, and he does a lot of interesting stuff. And what him seeing the idea of getting your best players out there and kind of building a style and an identity around that, like that's what teams do now. And it's where coaching has gone in a lot of sports. It's just like, let's try to get our best players out there and like give them the best chance to succeed. And I'm not saying he's like the only guy who ever did that. He's not the first guy to do that. People have been doing that for a long time, but he was really good at it. And it just so happened the rosters he had allowed him to play a brand of basketball that, in retrospect, looked more modern than what you were seeing. And so, I think he'd probably be the first one to tell you that, like, it wasn't like, oh, like I knew where basketball was going. It was just like, I'm just trying to fucking win games out here. And he was really good at that.